It is April 2020, and welcome to the Where Is Now podcast with Jesse and Billy. And this is the very first episode of the podcast.
That's what it is. I'm excited. I recently learned that the feeling you get in your stomach for excitement is the same that you get for terror. It's kind of like anxiety. It's that same thing, and then it's all up to you to decide what it is.
That's amazing.
And so I'm going with both.
Going with both. Honestly, we're going to be touching on that today. Everything, frankly, is a little of that.
So what are we doing here? Why did we start this podcast? Because I feel like you and I have discussions that I don't hear anybody else having fairly often. And often it's around pretty important things about where we're going as individuals, where we're going as communities, where we're going as a species. And I think we just we wanted to share it. So it's every episode is going to be taken on a very specific individual movement idea and kind of stripping it for its parts and seeing what we like and what we don't like and asking some questions.
And we're going to dive right in to the headlines today, which is suggesting, Jesse, that like over half of humanity is in a lockdown. Governments all over trying to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. And that means that half the global population is dealing with anxiety and isolation and experiencing prolonged exposure to their relatives. It's rough, and we're all trying to cope. So today we're going to seek out some ancient wisdom for guidance on what's a good mental state. How can we make it through the quarantine?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note that the passing of knowledge is kind of responsible for the effectiveness of some of the things that we've been able to do thus far. So just looking at the Middle East and this quarantine that we're under and looking at that history, I looked into this a little bit. Isolating the sick from the healthy when it looks like there's a contagion going on is mentioned in the Old Testament in Leviticus. So that's also make another point on that, which is that even back then they recognized that praying was not enough to deal with a plague. You know, it's like you had to go a little bit more. You had to take another step into reality. And then the Prophet Muhammad, a few hundred years later in the 600s, explicitly said, if you hear of a plague, do not go near that land. If a plague breaks out where you are, do not leave it. And what's fascinating about that is like that understood that he doesn't say like, if you have symptoms, don't leave it. He's saying, so there's an awareness there of incubation periods, of being potentially asymptomatic carrier. The fact that it's like, whatever your situation, do not leave that land. I find that pretty fascinating. And then a few hundred years later, Ibn Sina in Persia came up with the idea of the 40-day quarantine, which was then observed by traders from Italy when they were visiting. And they brought that back to Italy. And in time for the Black Plague, they were able to put in the quarantine and save people there. Not a lot of people, because still, like, I was reading in Florence, 60% of the city died. It's like pretty incredible. And one of those Florentines, one of those people in Florence was a guy named Giovanni Boccaccio, who was one of the people that started a movement, gathering small groups of friends and going out to the countryside to do quarantine together. And they would use music, dance, games, and Boccaccio's favorite thing, storytelling, to thrive during the quarantine.
That's huge. And you think about how little they knew back then, right? They had no benefit of the modern science and biology, but they still understood, like you said, it's clearly passing between people. Stay your ass at home. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
And so here we are at home, telling some stories. And you today wanted to tell me the story of how Stoicism helped Billy get his groove back.
Stoicism, man. Well, we were talking about philosophy, talking about just general ways of viewing the world and viewing yourself, and particularly in times of trial and difficulty. And this is certainly that for a lot of people. Stoicism is great. Stoicism is something that I've been familiar with for a while, and I try to practice it. Basically, Stoicism simply means, I think the two primary tenets are, it's first a real effort to constantly understand the world and yourself, understand reality, comport yourself, become familiar with it, submit to it in some way, right? Don't be fanciful, like, oh, I wish I could fly. Well, physics don't allow for it. So understand reality, and then again, similarly, but understand the difference between those things you can control and those things that are outside of your control. And so,
at what age do you have to start doing that? Like Billy, like when you're like reading nighttime stories to like a 5-year-old and they start going on their fantastical stories about wanting to fly, you just cut them off right there. Say, listen, I'm gonna cut you off right there.
Yeah.
Or like, or at what age do you have to start? You're getting rid of those fantasies.
That's a great question. I don't think you should get rid of fantasies. I think you need to be innovative and creative, and you need an imagination, and you want to hold on to your imagination long into your golden years.
Okay.
However, yes, you got to hold on to those. Good question. Okay. However, you've got to know that they are fantasies. At least do that, and that's the challenge. One of the things, Jess, we were talking about Stoicism, and you sent me a video on Facebook of a guy with like a cup, and he's throwing water at this massive inferno. He's slipping and fumbling, and he gets more water, and he puts it in the cup, and he throws it in it, like he's doing nothing, and yeah. And I think the point you were making.
No, but that's where we have a difference. Like,
yeah,
is he doing nothing? And so you as a Stoic, like, this guy clearly hasn't taken a second to ask himself, like, do I have control over this towering inferno, or do I need to accept it? He's just reacting, saying, fire, water, right? I guess at some level. And I'm saying, I said this other video to you of this guy who just started dancing like a villain on Superman's grave all by himself on like the steepest part of a hill at some music festival.
Right.
And then it was just this like waterfall effect or domino effect, just I don't know, or exponential growth effect of like one person came over to dance with him, then 3 people, and then like 8 people, and then within a few seconds the whole festival had like basically come onto this guy like dancing around this guy. And the same thing could have happened with this dude with the water.
That's right. It could happen, and that would be crazy. And that would be crazy if that happened. I think the key issue with our firefighter is he needs to know that the goal is then to inspire others, right? Or the goal is then to find others to help. If he truly believes that he's, denting this inferno, that is to his discredit. He is going to frustrate himself and then get burned alive. And I think so. It's just, again, you can be imaginative, you can be aspirational and inspirational, but just know that that's what you're doing. You're constantly trying to know what's up, and I love that.
Be strategic. So if he's gonna do this ineffective throwing of cupfuls of water at a towering inferno, then he should do it in a way that looks attractive and with flair that others are going to want to do it like that. And that should be his main strategy.
That is exactly right. He should get that sequin Michael Jackson jacket that he has. He should be colorful. He should be perhaps loud. He should do things, I don't know, make it look like a fun event somehow. So the video I sent you was from a YouTube channel called The Daily Stoic with a really cool smart guy named Ryan Holiday behind it.
Cursing the origin of the virus, being racist, perpetuating conspiracy theories, and hoarding toilet paper will not save you. Tweeting will not help anyone. It only distracts you from the many tasks at hand. Neither will sticking your head in the sand and pretending it's not that bad. All these things are wasting time that could be spent saving your life and others.
All right. No pressure. Yeah, this is really helping with my anxiety sitting at home, Billy.
So I picked that one because it's a little bit rough. He's coming straight for the viewer and challenging you directly. I think he's describing a number of choices, a number of behavioral options that we have. When things are rough, we can pretend it doesn't exist. We can come up with excuses. We can lament the situation, get angry, get sad, blame someone. It doesn't matter whether it's a pandemic or it's an issue with a loved one or something at work. And he's saying there are other ways to go about it. I think sometimes we default to certain behaviors, and part of Stoicism, most philosophies have this, And I like to think of a lot of secular, especially in this space, moral secular philosophy is kind of like a religion. It's a kind of in the sense that it's about growing, and it's about community, it's about becoming better. And so there are rituals, things you would say to yourself to remind yourself that there are other options even in the most dire circumstance.
Okay, can I just point out like one piece of blatant hypocrisy in that video? Is that dude says tweeting will not help anyone. And then literally, you guys didn't see this in the clip, but literally if you keep watching that video, 2 minutes later, he says, one little way you can help is sharing this video
on Twitter.
So I just want to say, I agree with him. Like, sharing good information right now is a way to help. I mean, like, yes. I can't think of many better ways to help, actually, if you have to stay at home. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you could create something beautiful. And I might get to that a little bit later when I get into my philosophy for the end times. My choice. But I agree with what he said at the end. I think it's more about being virtuous while tweeting at some level, right?
Yeah.
And that felt a little harsh.
In a different video, the same gentleman, Ryan Holiday, he does this pretty cool MMA analogy, and I love it. And so pretty much, let's say you're an MMA fighter, and you're in this fight.
That's mixed martial arts. That's like
mixed martial arts. Exactly.
UFC,
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, exactly, all that stuff. So you're in this fight. It's already round 2. You're in the fight. You're on the ground. You're on your back, getting choked out. Right. What he's saying is, in that moment, don't be confused about what's going on. You are losing the fight. You're not winning the fight. It's important to know that. And so that's a little harsh, very rarely do we.
Is this a real problem for UFC fighters? Are there many of them that in the moment of being choked out, like, get these illusions that they're winning?
I hope not. Like he's not going to be around for a while, or she's not going to be around for a while. Like, don't get illusions that you're winning. Don't think about dinner. Don't think about the judge's scorecard even. Like, let's actually get more relevant to the fight, but still outside of what you should be concerned with, Don't think about even the fact that the opponent has a really strong left hand, right? You train for that, but that's not relevant right now. Right now, if you're a fighter in that position, they're trained to know that you need to get some distance between the person, maybe try to escape one of your arms, and then maybe get to your side instead of on your back,
I feel like a lot of philosophies and a lot of people who are out there trying to help other people talk about, and a lot of us are seeking, is trying to be present, be there in the now. And so what does Stoicism bring in terms of like a practice? So like, I think about Buddhism, which seems to want to do a lot of the same things that Stoicism wants to do, which is allow you to maintain a tranquility of mind so that you can continue to not be a prisoner of your emotions, things like this. But Buddhism comes with a practice. There's meditation, there's yoga, there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to kind of build those muscles, so that when you're getting choked out, we've all been there, we're getting choked out on the ground and we think we're winning. No, I'm just kidding. It's like no, but like so that when you're under pressure, when you're feeling strong emotions and all that stuff, you're able to continue functioning. What's the practice for Stoics? Like, is there a practice?
The real practice is, again, constantly refining your frame of reference, trying to examine your situation without bias. And, you look back at things you've done only quickly to learn a lesson, to understand what you could have done differently. And then you move on, so do that every day. I really do attempt to do that. And one of the things that comes with that naturally is an aversion to untruths. You start to go, I can't lie. I need to try not to lie. And I think that that's just an awesome principle to have in any case. But Stoicism gets there because why? When you lie, you're introducing an untruth, and you're introducing it, and you're muddying the picture for yourself. And it's much better to have a very clear vision and move that way.
So what I just want to say, I have another question about Stoicism, because Stoicism, like the stuff that I looked at, the stuff that I saw, it for me, it can't be a complete philosophy, because for me, a complete philosophy needs to have kind of like an ethics I can really get down with. something that helps me decide right from wrong. Not just it seems like it tells you have to sit and think about right or wrong, but it doesn't seem like it helps me understand right from wrong. And like the fact that one of its greatest thinkers that keeps getting referenced is this Marcus Aurelius guy.
Yes.
He's an emperor. Okay, so he was writing down about Stoicism while he was invading the nations of, and I looked up some of the nations because I feel like we should shout them out: Quadi, Aquinicum, Pannonia. Now, these nations, we don't have any idea how to pronounce them because Marcus Aurelius, the same guy who was going home at night writing down about like, oh, it's important to think about virtue and all this stuff, would go out the next day and erase Aquinicum.
Yeah.
So to the point where we don't have any idea how to pronounce their names because he stomped them out. So there's a little bit of, it reminded me of like the Dave Chappelle thing about like Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
You know, he was like, hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. And then it was like, what are you looking at? Go make me a sandwich. Like to a slave, you know?
Yeah, no, I remember that skit. Yo, yes, man.
And so like, there's like there's a hypocrisy here.
Of course.
Or like, I don't know even if it's hypocrisy, but like there's a little bit of like, don't just tell me what to do, like show me what to do. And some of these Stoics, you know, don't stand the test of time.
For sure. I think a lot of people won't stand the test of time, and I think if you're an emperor of in Roman times before the advent of any sort of moral like international rights as a concept and all that stuff, he's got a lot to answer for, I guess. But yeah, man, like you know, go ahead.
But no, do you want to say more about that?
I can only say that. You know what's funny? I became a vegetarian for 6 months based on this very premise, based on the idea that our understanding of rights continues to expand from wealthy old white guys to, you know, persons of color and women and all this stuff as we continue to expand it. And at some point, and just the way we look back at some of the you know horrendous actions of the founding fathers and the people of that time, people are gonna look back and go, Billy was a cool dude, but yo, he was tearing up chicken. Look at him. There's even video of him on Instagram with his family eating pig and
celebrating it
and eating burgers. And look at him, he's disgusting, you know. And I was like, you know, and that compelled me to quit animal carcass altogether. But yeah,
I'm just picturing those 6 months of Instagram videos of you with your family and just like, and you having a great time. And as soon as the Instagram video comes on, you're just like,
oh no,
just making sure there's a record of you just.
Yeah, exactly. Is the camera on? I for one am angry. I ordered, I ordered the lentil soup, by the way, guys. Like what an asshole like I would be.
Or like all the things that we use that are made in China and the conditions that those people are working under right now, you know, it's
exactly. So someone could easily say that we aren't doing enough, you know, as we sit here using and buying these things off of Amazon with a wild, reckless abandon. And so I think it's a good criticism, but it's also, I don't know, it's a tough one. That's what I'll say there.
But like I said, in order to be an ethical being, I need my philosophy to cover a little more ground than Stoicism, to guide me a little bit more on some of these big ethical questions. And so one of the philosophies that I look to is existentialism. Mostly because I like the name, and actually one of my favorite things about existentialism, and I'll get to this in a second, is one of the words that existentialists throw around a lot. It's just such a great word to understand so many things, and it's got a certain power to it. I'm going to get to that in a second. But one of the things that existentialists, one of the ways in which I feel like they're alike the Stoics, is that they insist on not hiding from the worst aspects of reality. They insist on not living in a fantasy and on being very present and not hiding from the worst thing, acknowledging that you're in the chokehold, as Billy might say. And for them, the chokehold is unavoidable. And so death, pain, guilt, you know, suffering, these things nobody escapes them. And particularly the death thing. But unlike the Stoics, I feel like maybe they go a little further in terms of questioning the meaning of things, like in the sense that they say, you know, there is no inherent meaning out here on Earth. Like there's no Earth, the planet, the universe doesn't give us a list of virtues. And so the fact that the Earth throws us out here and doesn't really give us a list of things to do, yet gives us this ability to reflect, but not like a guide on what to reflect on and how and all those things, like it's absurd. And this is the word that I'm talking about. The absurdity.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. And they're not saying that the universe is absurd, and they're not saying that humans are absurd. They're saying that humans in the universe is absurd. So because we're always trying to make sense of something that can't really be made sense of, particularly suffering and death and all these things, right? Particularly sides of, and so an absurdity takes a lot of forms. And I know a lot of people, when they think of the word absurd in the United States and on planet Earth right now, think about Donald Trump and some of the antics that go on. But I just want you guys to know that you're not alone in the United States in terms of having some overly entitled person who inherited a bunch of wealth coming on TV and telling you what to do and how to do it and trying to speak like they're in this with you. Here in Canada, I'm in Montreal. Here in Canada, we get treated to every once in a while. Somebody pops in who played a historical role here that we've been trying to get rid of for a long time, but she pops back in every now and then. She speaks a little different than Donald Trump does. She has a little bit of a different like cadence, you might call it.
Go.
I'm speaking to you at what I know is an increasingly challenging time. A disruption that has brought grief to some, financial difficulties to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. Together we are tackling this disease, and I want to reassure you that if we remain united and resolute, then we will overcome it. That the attributes of self-discipline, of quiet, good-humored resolve, and of fellow feeling still characterize this country. We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us.
And that is the Queen speaking, Her Majesty the Queen, speaking from Windsor Castle with a strong message and a call for unity for people in her country, but yes, all over the world. Anne Macmillan is a former CBC London bureau chief, and she joins me now from London. What stood out for you there in her message?
It was very moving. I didn't expect to be so moved by what she had to say. Being a hardened old journalist, but she looked so sincere, which she is, obviously.
Obviously.
I was very, I thought that it was very interesting the way she talked about how, when we look back on this, we'll take pride in how we dealt with this problem.
Here's my two questions, Jesse. First
hit me. Yeah.
That's the Queen of England, and
yeah,
you're in Canada. You told me about this once before, but I don't fully understand why she's an authority or a figure of note in Canada. Can you explain this?
Nope. Next question. No. There's no, none of the philosophies I've studied make room for understanding why I have to watch her. Like, you know, why she's on all the money. Do you know how absurd this is?
Yeah, man.
That she comes in talking about we're in this together. We're all facing this financial hardship. She has enough, like that brooch, like that thing on her that she's wearing on her dress. Like there's like 80 diamonds. Like I don't know what the thing is in the middle of that. Like I don't know what jewel, what country in Africa that is from, or where she got that thing, or how much that's worth. But the 80 diamonds around it could definitely on its own help, like, I don't know how many thousands of people deal with the impact of this crisis. Like, so this idea that like, we're all sacrificing together, you know, it's insane. Like it's insane on the face of it, but this is another thing. So what is it about, you know, this was like, I found out about this because I just went on to Google News, and this was the top of the news that day here in Canada, was like that the Queen had made a rare message, a rare call out. And so what is this all about? Because it's not just the Queen. And this is what I want to get to. And existentialists can help us understand what's going on here.
Okay.
Why do people want to hear from the Queen right now? why do people want to hear from these politicians speaking in similar terms?
Right.
Because in the face of death, in the face of and when we get reminded of our mortality, and we get reminded of how alone we are in the universe, and one of the really frightening aspects of dying from COVID-19 is that you die alone, right? Like, just to get into the specifics of like how you die from this virus, because it's so contagious, there's nobody around you. You know, like your family's not around you. There's nobody around you. So there's like it's a virus that particularly makes you think about how alone you are, right? And this is something that existentialists talk about as unavoidable. And so in the face of that, one of the things that you can do is try to build unity with people, try to make life better for everybody. They seek unity. This is why one of the things I love about existentialists is they tend to always be kind of revolutionaries, fighting against the forces that create statuses and different levels. They tend to be egalitarian. They tend to want to fight for this unity. But in these moments, I'm going to call opportunistic people, whether they know it or not, like the Queen, like politicians, they also understand this, and so they come out with these messages too. They try to get to the front. If you look at Cuba, I was in Cuba when this all went off. I was there to show a film, and in Cuba, in the press conferences about COVID, they'll have the daily press conference, right? And the press conferences, everybody in the press conference is a friggin' scientist or a doctor, right? Like, there's no politician up there. Like, and whereas everywhere in North America you go, the daily press conferences is led by somebody who doesn't know anything about any of this stuff. Why are they there? Because they said, I'm the one doing the press conference, and they're the most powerful person, so they get to, because everybody knows that and then if you look at in Canada here, and I'm sure it's happening similarly all across the world, it definitely happened to Trump. Every politician in Canada that's in power right now, their approval rating's gone up. No matter how they handle, no matter what they're actually doing.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that they're going on television right now and saying, like, we're in this together. I got you. It's like they do this daily hug of the people.
Yeah. That's really frightening, bro. That's really frightening.
Yeah.
Frankly, what you're describing is an indictment of the nature of politics and governing, but also an indictment of like human nature, if you ask me. Like, people aren't, people do expect that as well, and people are legitimately excited, as you said. There's a reason people tune into that, and you're one of the few people. Would you say you're one of the few people that like shook your head and was like, what the hell is this? Most people actually feel heartwarmed and excited. So,
well, if somebody I loved and respected and looked up to was to come out and give like a wee message at this moment, like a heart-stirring speech, it would be hard for me to like go into my existential. I would probably get wrapped up in it. If like LeBron James came out and did like a similar thing, as long as he wasn't like clearly a Nike commercial,
right?
Like,
which it would be, Jesse. It would be
which it likely would be, but maybe he's already done it. I don't know. But I don't know if you've been getting this, but I've been getting a lot of ridiculous emails about COVID-19 from like corporations. Like I got one from Hewlett Packard. It's like, I was like, how did Hewlett Packard get my email? It's like, right. And I looked over, it's like, right, I bought a Hewlett Packard printer like 6 years ago. It doesn't even have, it's not even working. It doesn't have ink. It hasn't had ink in a long time.
Right.
And, I have a thirsty Hewlett Packard printer. I don't even know if it would work if it had ink. And Hewlett Packard has my email, and they decided this is the moment. And the email starts out with like, we know a lot of you are wondering, what our response to COVID-19 is. Like, none of us.
No one is wondering what Hewlett Packard
Zero of us.
The printer company.
So in the face of these things, like I look at these philosophies. I can't grab a hold of one philosophy. I grab not just philosophies, but quotes and different models in my life. I think of them like, I went through a brief period as a kid and was into Pokemon. Did you live the Pokemon period?
Hell yeah, Pokemon was awesome.
Yeah. Man. So I see these things as like Pokeballs. So how you're faced with certain situations and you're fighting a certain Pokemon.
Yeah.
A certain situation. It's like you need to get the right Pokemon. Like you're fighting a fire Pokemon, you need the water Pokemon or whatever. Something like this. You're like rock, paper, scissors.
I get that.
And in the face of absurdity, existentialism is like, that's my Pokemon. That's my existential sore, or whatever the existentialist Pokemon would be called. I choose you.
I get that.
Like, I think philosophy is at its strongest when it gives you language, or maybe language is at its strongest when it gives you language to describe something that you kind of already felt. Like but you weren't able to express.
Right.
And then expressing it not only allows you to tell other people about it, but also just allows you to like call on it.
Right.
Because now you have a word in your head, you can like call on it. And so Viktor Frankl, man, this guy, a brief introduction to Viktor Frankl, he gets thrown into a Nazi concentration camp. And he comes to this conclusion, like pretty clearly, that those who were in the camps who had an idea of what they, you know what, I've got a clip for this. Let's let Viktor Frankl say it.
The lesson I had to learn in Auschwitz was that those prisoners, those inmates, were most likely to survive, those who had a meaning orientation toward the future, toward a work to complete in the future, toward a person waiting for them at home, those people who had a strong meaning orientation.
Can we find meaning in any instance, in any case, a person who faces death
certainly,
imminently?
Because I'm not tiring of saying life can be meaningful or made meaningful not only by doing a deed, by creating a work, and beyond that, by our experiencing something or by our encountering someone. And to encounter him in his uniqueness means by loving him. But even if need be, whenever we are confronted with an unchangeable fate, whenever we have to face, say, an incurable disease, an inoperable cancer, even then there is the highest meaning potential to realize, to fulfill, to transmute, to turn a predicament into an achievement, a human accomplishment, or to turn tragedy into a triumph.
So he gives us a guide, right? So there's like 3 ways you can create meaning for yourself. So remember, he's within the existentialist. He's like, if you're in a Nazi death camp, like he describes like when you arrive at the Nazi death camp, at the concentration camp, like you walk up to a soldier and a soldier tells you to go right or left, like the first day you arrive, right? And he's just looking at you, just looking at your face, and he's trying to decide whether or not you're actually going to be able to get much work done here. Like whether or not you're in physical shape to get work done. And within a few seconds he has to decide whether you're going left or right. If you're going right, you're going to your death. If you're going left, you're sticking around. And there's just these constant moments where you can die for the little, most like insignificant things. There's all these like little ways to try and stay alive, and there's just no way to find meaning, like to believe that this situation is giving meaning in and of itself. Like it's so hard to be able to help anyone. It's so hard to be able to do anything. And so he talks about like, here's a guide to finding meaning, right? And so the first thing you can do is create something, bring something into the world, and that's like broadly defined. And you because really what you're looking for here, in order to have tranquility of mind, in order to be peaceful, is a mission, right? And so by finding something you really want to create and you want to put out there, broadly defined, bringing that into the world, that's one way to find meaning. The second one is finding a way to love another human being and doing it. And
why does it have to be a human being?
Or maybe it doesn't have to be a human being. That's what he talks about. But like, this is one of those things that maybe he's not gonna age well. He's not gonna age well.
I want to see where you go with that. What about when androids want to get married and stuff, man? Like, what's the issue? Or people, that's happening now. People are, anyway, find a way to experience love, I guess, Yeah.
And to care for somebody else, to like truly care for them,
Got you.
To really want the best for them and to really help them develop.
What's that third
so
one?
The third one is to suffer with dignity. And there's like a big catch there on that one, right? Because people can fall into that one easily. And he says, meaning is available through suffering, provided that the suffering is unavoidable. If it is avoidable, the meaningful thing to do is to remove the cause. For unnecessary suffering is masochistic and not heroic. But I think what I just want to like summarize like what I think he brings to me in this other quote from him, which is that finding meaning is like not, it can sound like I'm saying it's super simple, but like acknowledging that that's what you have to do in the world. It's like that's what you have to do. That's what I get from existentialism. It's like it's not given to you. You have to go do that for yourself. And going around asking what the meaning of life is for Frankl is like asking. He says it's like asking a chess master what the best move is. It depends on the situation. And like right now, in the world, the people that are listening to this are going to be in a variety of different situations. A lot of them are going to be like us, sitting at home, and probably the first one is going to apply. Like, let's create something. Let's do something. Or it might be that they're having to take care of a loved one. It might be that they're trying to figure out, like, how do I be a better father? How do I be a better mother? How do I love my kid truly? But then there might be some people listening to this right now who need to figure out how to suffer their unavoidable situation with dignity. And I think everybody can get something from Frankl, and that's what I love about him. And it comes out of this really dark, hopeless place of the death camp.
My only issue with existentialism as opposed to Stoicism, I find them to be almost parallel in many ways, or tangential. They're touching quite a bit, but it's just an emphasis on negativities. Existentialism to me obviously is born from real pain. It's born from some of the worst experiences in human history. It's a preoccupation with death and pestilence and harm. And so you navigate that this way. And I just think Stoicism it allows room for those things. It knows that those things exist. It asks you to be honest that they exist, but in terms of its focus, it's like, well, that's gonna, you can't, you just look over here and really command your space. So what do you think about that though? The pessimism, is that not bother you at all?
I think no, because I look at how these existentialists actually lived, and I realize that the process they're talking about is what liberates them to really enjoy the pleasures of life, right? So Camus, actually let's hit this Camus video.
Camus was drawn to his theme because, in his philosophy, we are all, unbeknownst to us, already living through a plague. That is, a widespread, silent, invisible disease that may kill any of us at any time and destroy the lives we assumed was solid. The actual historical incidents we call plagues are merely concentrations of a universal precondition. They are dramatic instances of a perpetual rule, that we are vulnerable to being randomly exterminated by a bacillus, an accident, or the actions of our fellow humans. We assume that we've been granted immortality, and with this naivety come behaviors that Camus abhorred. A hardness of heart, an obsession with status, a refusal of joy and gratitude, a tendency to moralize and judge. The book isn't attempting to panic us, because panic suggests a response to a dangerous but short-term condition from which we can eventually find safety. But there can never be safety, and that is why for Camus we need to love our fellow damned humans and work without hope or despair for the amelioration of suffering. Life is a hospice, never a hospital.
One of the issues I take with existentialism is, as I've read it, it really believes that, not only are we all, obviously we're all fated to die, suffering to some degree is unavoidable, conflict is unavoidable, and that preoccupation with it, to me, leads to a kind of cynicism. And if you take that same preoccupation, now we're talking about it on a personal level, like it's an interpersonal ethic. But if you apply it on a global scale, for instance, I think existentialism leads to the notion that there is never a peacetime. Just like he was saying, the plague is never gone. There's never peace. It's only a cessation of hostilities, right? If there's no peace in the moment, if there's no war in the moment, just be ready for the next one. And so it leads to bloated militaries and militaristic policies and stockpiles of weapons, and that's one of my concerns. What do you say to that?
Well, they would say, I would think, like somebody like Camus would say that you're being driven by fear, right? So like when you're stockpiling like that. Now I don't know if Bill Hicks, the comedian, would talk about himself as an existentialist, but he's somebody that I've always appreciated. And when he was actually dying, and nobody knew he was dying, it's one of his last performances, and he has it's a really great clip people should check out. It's I believe it's known to YouTube or /history as It's Just a Ride. It's the last 3 minutes of his last performance of his last HBO special, I believe it was. And he talks about, at the end of the day, it all comes down to a choice between love and fear. Like, do we want to view the world with the eyes of love or views the world with the eyes of fear. And if you don't accept your mortality, if you don't come to terms with the fact that your life could be taken with you in some freak accident or something bad could happen, if you don't come to terms with that, then you like almost by default will live in fear of losing it. I don't know if it's 100% true or applies to all people, but this is what I think what I get from the existentialists. And so once you're seeing things in terms of fear, then that leads to a whole bunch of negative behaviors. I'm sure most people would agree with this, that you don't act your best when you're scared. So I have another ethical question for you, Billy.
Oh, snap. Let's do it.
Do hoarders love their families more than non-hoarders?
Interesting. No, not necessarily. Not because of their hoarding. I need more information. But
fair enough.
But hoarders are they're taking action for sure.
Yeah.
So a similar question would be the person who on March, once they found out about COVID-19 and really saw the full consequences of it, the person who went straight to the gun range and went and bought a couple of AR-15s, do they love their families more? It's a similar question.
Yeah. One of the crazy things about like the hoarding, so take the toilet paper, so there's all these stories I was reading about all this toilet paper thing. I was in Cuba and I used some of my precious internet time to look into like why toilet paper, like what's going on with the toilet paper. And there's a fascinating thing, which is every report that comes out, every article, every person who puts out into the world condemning the hoarding of toilet paper makes it more rational for you to go and buy as much toilet paper as you can do, because like you're putting on more and more people's radar that there are other people out there who are trying to buy up by the toilet paper, and they're going to leave you without toilet paper. Right. So you at least better go get yourself like a good 20 rolls,
Yeah.
Maybe not 1,000 rolls, but at least go get yourself some toilet paper, even though you probably wouldn't be getting some because you already have 20.
Ridiculous, Jesse. I saw eBay was having toilet paper for like $30 a roll. People were bidding. And I'm thinking that doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a weird time, man.
That could be some special. I was in Cuba and I was supposed to meet up with my friend to play basketball down there, at the court there. And I showed up a little late and he wasn't there anymore. And I asked the guys at the court, I described him, like, did you see this dude? And they were like, yeah, he left like out of nowhere. He was just gone. And then I met up with him later that night and I was like, well, what happened? Why weren't you there? Because I didn't have a cell phone in Cuba. And so meet up with him later and he's like, man, I was there, I was waiting for you, but then I saw this unbelievably beautiful woman like walking down the street towards me, and then I looked down and she had two massive kind of like what are they, like packs of toilet paper.
Okay.
And so this is kind of like before the
dot. I'm like, what? Finish the sentence, please.
Yeah, just trying to be cinematic. The camera's panning down.
Yeah,
I was like, why are we panning down?
What's happening?
This is feeling a little pornographic. Like why are we just like looking at it? And it's like, oh, she's holding a bunch of toilet paper, because there was already a shortage of toilet paper, like a real shortage of toilet paper in Cuba because of the embargo from the U.S. And so he ran over to her and was like, where did you get this toilet paper?
Wow.
And she told him where she got it, and he ran over there trying to get some toilet paper because he hadn't had any in a while. And by the time he got there, she was like, and there's no line, it's great. And by the time he got there, the lineup was around the corner. And he was like, well, I might as well stay. And then so he never came back and played basketball.
Yo, what an amazing short story. First off, I thought he left you for a beautiful woman. Apparently her beauty had nothing to do with it.
I thought too when he was telling me the story.
That's great. I like that. There's a couple of nice little turns in that story. I fuck with that. Jesse, tell me about this Revenge of the Introverts. What's this about?
Oh yeah, okay. I was telling you about this. So I have a friend. I don't know if I should name him on this one because I don't know if he actually wants this take public. So I'm not going to name him, but I have a close friend who, when I was describing this conflict, that I felt like this conflict I had with somebody I was dating had to do with the fact that I was an extrovert and she was an introvert.
Okay.
And this friend I was telling this about was like, well, of course, of course, introverts are naturally jealous of extroverts or envious of extroverts. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, like the world's totally made for extroverts. It's like, as an introvert, you kind of, they're feeling like they miss out on things because, I'm talking about true introverts here. I'm talking about real introverts, not extroverts who pretend to be introverts when they're talking to you because they want you to believe that they have this rich internal life that you don't have. Like, they're trying to make you feel jealous about how great their alone time is.
Right.
I know you're out there. I know who some of you are. I know you're like, I know these people who are like always the last people to leave a party. Yes. And then you ask them, but they're like, oh, I'm totally an introvert.
Yes.
And you're like, no, you're not. So I'm talking about real introverts, like people who their energy gets sapped by being around people like me.
People like Jesse Freeston. That's what you're talking about. You are an extrovert yourself. So
yeah, yes. I'm totally an extrovert. There we go. And so I'm talking about like real introverts here. Right now, like if my friend's theory is true, and I'm not saying it's true, that the world is kind of made for extroverts to do better in certain, at least in certain fields and certain aspects. Man, is it ever introvert revenge time right now?
That's true.
Like introverts clearly have the upper hand right now.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Even though the world still expects the like, how does an introvert feel being on like a Zoom thing with 12 people, like a WhatsApp video, but they're at home,
Yeah.
But it's I've seen that actually. I've seen that. No one said revenge. I like the phrasing of it as revenge, but I've seen people talk about just loving it. And it's like, I'm an introvert, so I love it. I'm trying to stay here forever.
For real, huh? And so you're loving this.
I am not. I don't know if I'm an introvert, man. I'm in that middle space. I can totally rock out with you anywhere and with good people and have a good time. And I think I mentioned my age twice already, so I'll say it again. 37. At this stage in my life, I am definitely oriented towards chilling at home in a quiet thing and doing my own thing with a small intimate group or just myself. But if invited out, man, I have a great time. I can totally be the source of the energy at a thing if it comes to that.
Man, you hosted a talent show, right? Like you used to host a talent show.
Yes, back in the day. Used to love that. That was so much fun.
Like that, your only job is to bring energy, right? That's your main job.
right. Exactly. Bring energy and then say
a bunch of people you don't
correctly.
Know.
Exactly. Say the names correctly and bring energy, and that's it. It was great. I could still do that. I could still get excited about doing that. But then I'll need to come home, and I need you to leave me alone for a day and a half. That's what I need. That's what I need.
All right. So all right. Like I'm still at the stage where I have to convince myself that I have something to gain by being at home alone. Like that could it's something I need. It's like make me a better person or something, And I have convinced myself of that. And
that's so interesting, man.
But yeah, but like I would be the one, like if I was hosting a talent show where I would be like, what do you mean it's over? At the end of it, I'm loving it. I'm just getting
started. I'm here all week, ladies. I'm here
prying the microphone out of my hands, I'm biting them.
We got another show at 9, Jesse. We got another show.
Yeah. So tell me about, you wanted to talk about conspiracy theories.
Yes. One of the things brought up in the Stoicism video was a quick nod to don't engage in conspiracies. And conspiracies, that's a whole topic. What exactly is a conspiracy and all of that. But right now people are accusing 5G technology towers as being part of this. The anti-vaccination community, which was already pretty strong before this, they are becoming even more strident as everyone's looking for a vaccine for this cure. They're certain that it's part of a scheme to do what? I'm not exactly sure, but it'll affect the children and it's a whole thing. And I just find it interesting. Our government isn't always as open. They're having like big meetings every day talking about everything that they know. And I don't know if I'm crazy for believing them in this, but I believe that they're telling us to a large degree what they know.
I want to say on the conspiracy theory thing is like, this is like a great exercise. I feel like this moment is a great exercise for all of us in humility and acknowledging that none of us have any fucking clue what's going on right now. Like,
it's true.
At some level, it's, how did this thing start? Where did it start? Who's responsible? I mean, I'm likely to go with the dominant story on this one. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, and it's like, anytime there's this much upheaval, there's clearly going to be a bunch of different powerful groups and actors and things who start making moves. Like, I mean, like moving the U.S. Navy into Venezuelan waters. It's like there's all kinds of opportunistic stuff that's going to start happening that's going to make it look like, oh, this was the plan, and it's right. And it's going to be like, you will prove it in reverse. It'll be like, oh, look, they took advantage of this moment to do this. That means they clearly started this.
Right.
But I just think it doesn't prove anything. I mean, the fact that I think there's no doubt that there's people breaking quarantine right now to have secret meetings because they don't trust doing it over Zoom or whatever, and are making plans.
So cryptic. Who are we talking about here exactly? Are you just talking about just
we're talking about like every powerful person on Earth right now.
Yes.
Is trying to figure out how do you adapt to this new reality.
Sure.
Some of them with more evil plans than others.
Sure. Exactly.
And some of them may be doing some really good stuff. Like maybe there's some billionaires out there right now who are really not thinking selfishly and really thinking like getting organized. But people with power in this moment are trying to adjust.
Sure.
And are trying to see how they can take advantage of this moment, not just people with power.
Yeah, and I want to clarify when I said that, it's time, like, believe the government. I believe the doctors in the government first, and then even then, one thing that was I was thinking about it and stewing over it. As recently as 2 weeks ago, or less than that, fewer days than that, articles were around urging people not to wear masks. I forwarded those articles. I'd be walking around at the grocery store going and thinking about that article, and it was saying that there should be like a social stigma towards people wearing masks because those masks need to be reserved for medical personnel. And it was an interesting case being made for like the value of people based on their utility. It was interesting. But anyway, long story short, then we learn what we're learning now is that, wear masks. Make a mask if you have to. Wearing a mask is not a flimsy and poor way to live your life. So was that not true 2 weeks ago? Of course it was. It's just, it goes back to what you're saying. Nobody knows anything, and it's scary. Go ahead.
There's another level to that one, which leads to another major ethical dilemma for me. And it was pointed out on a podcast called Canada Land here in Canada, which was questioning the journalists. So it was the World Health Organization and the CDC in the US, I believe, who were the ones who came out and said, masks are not helpful, or masks are only helpful if you have symptoms, right? Like these were kind of the two kind of things going on. Like masks are only helpful to stop other people from getting infected. Right. If you have symptoms, you should wear a mask. And so, I just want to point out that like even when that was happening, my good friend here who's from Taiwan was like, "You guys are out of your mind." How could it was just she was just calling bullshit from day one. And actually her mom was like frantically telling her to come back to Taiwan, and this was now had moved to the top of the list of like why North Americans cannot be trusted to deal with a pandemic. They have no fucking clue what they're doing. They don't even think masks work. And so and she was like, how could it not help? Like it's about these droplets that come out, you know what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about? And so and I think there's definitely some truth to like you have to learn how to use it right. But the World Health Organization and the CDC didn't come out and say immediately like learn how to use it right.
Exactly.
They said don't do it. And so what was going on? So this is what Canada Land was talking about. The podcast I was talking about. So what was really going on here? They know that if they say masks are important, people are going to go out and try and get masks. And if people go, especially if they think their health is involved and the health of the people they love, they're not going to go and get the cheapest mask. they're going to say, what's the best mask? Oh, it's the N95 mask. It's like there would have been a run on N95s at a time when health workers, as a friend of mine called it, are a force multiplier. So it's like an N95 mask in the hands of a health worker is so much more valuable than an N95 mask in the hands of anybody else, in the sense of, or a food worker or somebody who's on the front lines, because it's the difference between them infecting or getting infected like dozens or hundreds of people, And so there's an ethical question there that I'm pretty convinced the World Health Organization and the CDC, and then the journalists who kind of, maybe in some cases unquestioningly, which I understand, that's the World Health Organization, that's right. CDC, repeated, was a question of like lying. It's definitely a Stoic question, lying to say it's this Cuomo quandary again,
Yeah, I mean, look, if that's the case, we're gonna have to tease that out through some investigating. I don't know who's gonna do that, and I don't know if the truth will even ever be put out if that was the case. But that totally makes sense. Though that lines up. I can see that being the case. And so I'll take the moment just to say that a moment ago I'm making fun of conspiracy theorists, but I understand a lot of where it comes from. We have a rich history of abuse and underhanded, covert machinations, and that's where that comes from. So,
man, we're like, you and I are like the children of the Iraq War. Like we, in our like most impressionable age, got brutally lied to in order to kill millions of people, or I don't know, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
There's numbers go all over the place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like that, how could that not make you skeptical? Like that's a pretty big thing. And so I would just say that like the underlying absurdity of that whole discussion though is that nobody was prepared for this. Like there's all kinds of people talking about for a long period of time that a pandemic like this was just inevitable. It's a question of time. Humanity's been through it so many times. If you take the long run of human history, it's like it's guaranteed to happen at some point. And the fact that we're so unprepared with some of the very basic things, and some of the and it was that it would be a respiratory problem that would be this kind of, it was like these were like some of the most obvious forms it would take. And the fact that we were so unprepared is an indictment on the system. All right, man.
Jesse, this is 2 hours. I have no clue how we're gonna edit this down, but I'll give it a go.
We gotta sign off. We gotta sign off though.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. How do we sign off?
I think everybody is obligated to review, give this a 5-star review, and write some comments on wherever you get your podcast, and share it with people. Like and subscribe. Press all the buttons. Just go accept the report button, and the thumbs down button. Just all the rest of them are game.